Recently, the Ministry of Labour or Labour Ministry have revised the base year for the consumer price index for industrial worker. So this is a very important current affair. This is a very important current affair. So since after a very long time, means after a big gap, the Labour Ministry, which is in charge of preparing this very important inflation index, that is consumer price index for industrial worker. Okay, so there's a chance that for your coming prelims, they will ask a question regarding consumer price index for industrial worker. In the year 2015, UPSC have asked a question regarding a consumer price index industrial worker. We will see that what is the type of question. Okay, so regarding consumer price index for industrial worker, first try to understand that this is one of the inflation index where we can measure inflation for the industrial worker, for the working class, people. Okay, how the inflation impacts them is measured through this particular index, and this index is prepared by the Labour Bureau under the Ministry of Labour. And why it is news now? Recently the base year to prepare this index have been revised. The last in the earlier index, so this is very important. Okay, this can be a potential question. See, the earlier base year was 2001. Now from 2001 base year, it was revised to the year 2016. So note down. So the new base year for consumer price index for industrial worker is 2016. The earlier base year is 2001. So Ministry of Labour, which is in charge of this particular index, or the Labour Bureau, which comes under the Ministry of Labour, have revised it. Okay. Now try to understand that every inflation index normally have to be revised in a 5-year gap, but consumer price index for industrial worker have not been revised for a longer period. So after revising this index very recently, the government have said that from now onwards, every 5 years we will be regularly updating the base year. Okay. Now what is the need for revising the base year? Because see, over a period of time, the consumption pattern of the consumer will change. Okay, what we consume in 2001 is different from what we consume in 2016. The importance for certain items will change. So to reflect the changing consumption pattern of the consumer, any inflation index, including the consumer price index for industrial worker, have to be revised. Okay, so UPSC can ask you, okay, what is the need for revising the consumer price index or any inflation index? It is to reflect the changing consumption pattern. Okay, since this industrial worker is to measure the inflation index of working class population, so to reflect the changing consumption pattern of the working class population over the years, the base year are revised, and I already told you the base year have been revised from the year 2001 to 2016. Now this figure, okay, now another potential question UPSC can ask, what UPSC will say that, okay, so you are first supposed to know what are the important, which way is getting higher weightage. Okay, in the index, there are many items are there, many headings are there, okay, they are grouped in different group. Okay, so the most important group is foods and beverages. So foods and beverages is having a weightage. Another heading is, so one group is foods and beverages. Then education, health and transport is grouped into under one heading. Then housing is there. So these are the 3 important headings under the consumer price index for industrial worker. One is foods and beverages, education, health and transport. So try to understand that since consumer price, this is a CPI-IW is a type of consumer price index. So you don't get confused with the consumer price index combined, which is released by the Ministry of Statistics. So don't get confused with that. Okay. So one important point, this was the 2020 prelims question also. Okay. Consumer price index, whichever it is, it includes services. But wholesale price index is not having services. Okay. So consumer price index is having services. That's why education, health and transport all are included. Okay. So education, health and transport is another important heading under this index. Then housing is there. Now they can ask you what happened to this weightage. Okay. What happened to the weightage of foods and beverages, whether they have increased or decreased. So if you look into the 2001 and 2016, the new base year, you can see that foods and beverages weightage have been decreased. Okay. Earlier, the foods and beverages weightage was 46.2%. So in the new base year, the weightage for foods and beverages was reduced to 39.17. So one important point to note down is that in the revised base year for consumer price index for industrial worker, foods and beverages weightages have come down. Now looking into the education, health, transport sector heading, okay, their weightage have increased. Education, health, transport, their weightage have been increased from 23.26 to 30.31. So approximately 30%. Okay. So foods and beverages weightage have decreased. Education, health, transport weightage have increased. Now coming to the housing sector. Housing sector, there is a minor increase is there from 15.27 to 16.87. These are the three important headings you need to keep in mind. So among the three important groups of items, foods and beverages weightage decreased, education, health, transport weightage increased, housing increased. Then another group is, it's not that important, but especially this chewing tobacco products. Okay, chewing tobacco products is there from 2.27%, it is reduced to 2.07. And then the others group mainly include fuel, light, clothing, etc. So their weightage also have been decreased in a minor way from 13% to 11.58. But what I am trying to say is that these are not that important. Important is the three indicators: beverages, education, health, transport, housing. What happened to their weightage, whether they have increased or decreased. Okay, so that you need to keep in mind. Okay, now another question they can ask is, what is the importance? Why this index is having so much of importance? Okay, because most importantly, why this index is important is that, okay, this index is the benchmark. Okay, you know that the government employees, okay, the government employees dearness allowance, see, along with their salary, DA has been provided, dearness allowance is provided to government employees. Okay, so the government employees DA is linked to consumer price index for industrial worker. So that's a very, very, very important point. Okay, so this index is used as a benchmark for calculating the dearness allowance for government employees, so that the inflation impact for the government employees will be minimal because their salary is adjusted with this dearness allowance. Okay, so this consumer price index industrial worker have to be updated so that the real inflation impact can be managed by the government employee. Okay, so that is one important thing you need to know, that it's mainly used for calculating, this index is mainly used for calculating the dearness allowances for government employee. That is one important point. Second, for the pensioners get dearness relief. Okay, the dearness relief for pensioners is also calculated based on this index. And for certain sectors, industrial workers, their wages and wages for industrial workers in some sectors is also linked to this index. So they can ask you this consumer price index industrial worker was in news. They will ask you what is the importance of this index. So 1, 2, 3 they can give you. So if a question been asked, you can easily answer it. And finally, what do you need to know is that who releases this index? Okay, so this index is released by the Labor Bureau, which comes under the Ministry of Labor. And this was the question been asked in the year 2015. In the year 2015, UPSC asked this question: which of the following brings out the consumer price index number for industrial worker? It is released by the Labor Bureau. So you are also supposed to know who releases the other, for example, for consumer price index, who releases it? It is the Ministry of Statistics, that National Statistics Office, which comes under the Ministry of Statistics, okay? And for other, like consumer price index for agricultural labor, consumer price index for rural worker, it is released again by Labor Bureau. And for wholesale price index, it is the new department, that is Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, okay? So they are releasing wholesale price index. Since a question has been asked, you are supposed to know who releases other inflation index.